Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Sethurst in Los Angeles. Be sure to like and please subscribe to our channel.
And I am Alison Norrington in London, and welcome to the Story Hour.
The Story Hour sits at the intersection of storytelling and technology. We bring you the story behind the stories, how it's written, how it's produced, how it's distributed, and even the personal stories behind the storytellers themselves.
We talk with the master writers, producers, directors, authors, and technologists, covering it all from film and television to literature, virtual and augmented reality, and more, as well as the innovations in production, technology, and distribution that are changing the how of storytelling.
Our guest today holds a Bachelor in Theater Arts from San Francisco State University. His reporting has been heard on NPR's All Things Considered and APM's Marketplace.
Noah Nelson is the founder of No Proscenium, a publication dedicated to exploring the immersive and experiential arts. Its sister site, Everything Immersive, and co-founder of LEIA, the League of Experiential and Immersive Artists. Welcome, Noah.
Hello, Noah.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Brian. Hi, Allison. It's good to see you, if only virtually.
Lovely to have you, Noah.
Yeah, it's been. I mean, we obviously we talked on Skype before this, but it's been so long since I've seen you two in person. I think Brian, the last time I think was in Vancouver.
It was in Vancouver at VIF, yes.
Allison, I think what was it like the second Story World or something like that? It's been
wow.
No, it wasn't. It was WeirdCon because I think WeirdCon was 2014, 13. Or it can't be that
after. Was Story World after WeirdCon? I can't remember. It's been WeirdCon was after 2014. Anyway, that's
talking weird.
I think before we get into everything, I would love for you to tell us about No Proscenium, because I remember when Caitlin Burns said to me around VIF, she said, "I'd like to have Noah from No Proscenium," and I was like, No Proscenium. I don't know what that is. I guess I had been so immersed in production, I actually hadn't looked up. And when we had the opportunity to have you, it was great. So can you tell our audience about No Proscenium?
Oh, sure. So the short format is we like to call ourselves the guide to everything immersive, which is terribly pretentious, but also my marketing friends tell me you're supposed to like exaggerate a little. But it's not entirely an exaggeration because our beat is all things immersive and experiential. The heart of what we do focuses on immersive theater because I'm a theater nerd. As you know, I'm got a theater degree. So what am I going to do? I got to champion my people. And then on top of that, I have a deep interest in digital immersive, so virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. And then there's all the other things that are associated with it: escape rooms, themed entertainment, anywhere where people are trying to not just tell stories, but involve the audience with the worlds they're creating and play around with the idea of agency and embodiment. So if it fits inside that box, and it's a pretty big box, we're interested in it. So
can you just give the website? Yeah. We'll put it below. But it's an amazing resource. If you really want to know what's going on with all things immersive, it is an amazing resource. Can you just give us the URL?
Yeah, it's www.noproscenium.com.
Terrific.
Which is a great name if you're a theater person because you know what a proscenium is and everyone else doesn't. So, but you know, what are you going to do?
Like you said, you're only people.
Yeah. I even know what a passerelle is. Go figure that one out.
Oh my. So yeah. That's No Pro in a nutshell.
I want to ask you, we've had a year, like we're now tomorrow, 1st of April, 2021. We've had a year pretty much since we've been confined to talking to people on screens like we are in little boxes, right? So in terms of the immersive industry, where so much of that location-based entertainment and theatrical elements and escape rooms relied on the physicality of being in the room, what's been your experience of watching the shift? How quickly have people pivoted? What have you seen in terms of changes of behaviors? And the big question, how or will there be a return to live as there was before? What's your thoughts on all of that?
All right. Just the simple stuff. No, but this is cool. That's how I tend to do it with people too.
Cut to the
you know, the paradox of the last year is that it was probably the busiest we've ever been at No Pro. even though the heart of what we do and the heart of what we love is live immersive experiences.
Mhm.
Uh, because of everything moving online, there were more people willing to experiment in more places. And, traditionally we've covered some of what we would call remote shows, but for
Mhm.
the most part, we've been pretty dedicated to sending people into physical locations. With location no longer a limitation, I had my reporters who were in Los Angeles covering things in London. I had my London people covering things in New York. I had folks in, Boston covering things in Chicago. It didn't matter where you were anymore. And so we were able to cover a lot more. And indeed, everythingimmersive.com, which we were intending to roll out as our searchable site, just to answer the question, what am I going to do this weekend? And just type in, where you were. We had to pivot that into being something that could direct people to all kinds of remote work. So we had this like quick reimagining of what we were directing people towards. I've seen work that's been produced on Zoom. I've seen a lot of work that's gone to, people are physically mailing things to folks. There's been a lot of pod plays. There have been, experiential spatial audio based pod plays, which are probably my absolute favorite things. Um, there's been no shortage of imagination and innovation in the past year, and it's kept us on our toes. Uh, a lot of the work is scrappy and not polished, but then there are some things that are just mind blowing. The work of Darkfield, who created Darkfield Radio, comes to mind.
Tell us what dark
For
field radio is.
Yeah, so for years, Darkfield is this production company out of the UK. Traditionally, what they do is a spatial audio piece that they bring people into a shipping container, sit you down. They've set decked the shipping container to be evocative of the space that they're then going to mentally put you in just via spatial audio alone. So you go into the shipping container, you see what's been set up. In the case of an activation they did for the Invisible Man movie last year, it was a small theater in a shipping container. So when I say small, I mean 2 rows of seats, and then a curtain on the wall of the shipping container that's evocative, but you can't tell what's going on. Then it's headphones on, lights out, you can't see anything, and the whole thing takes place in your headphones. And they are masters of this form. Unable to take people into shipping containers anymore, they adapted the work to be done inside people's homes. The piece that I've experienced that way is a piece called Eternal, which was originally created for the Bram Stoker Festival in Dublin. So you can imagine it's a vampire story. And for this one, the instructions are to you download the app. You need to be on the app at a specific time. It's got that element of immersive theater. It's like direct instructions. You can't do it whenever you want, only when they're broadcasting. And you are to do it alone in bed under the covers with the lights off.
Oh,
And it
wow.
is the single
That's Allison's whole life. So
thing.
just kidding,
Yeah,
Allison.
no, it's the single freakiest thing I've ever experienced in the horror genre, and it's just spatial audio. It plays with your mind
Where
in
can people
intense
find that,
ways.
Noah? We'll put the resource below, but where can people find
Yeah,
that?
Darkfield has an app, the Darkfield Radio app. So Darkfield's all one word, then radio, and the app I believe is available on both iOS and Android. They sell tickets in the UK and the US, I think probably also in Canada. And also, anytime you're looking for this stuff, everythingimmersive.com is our searchable site. So if I say something, people should feel free to hit us up. We list it all and shows you, how much things cost and when the next available shows are.
I wanted to ask you, just changing direction for a moment. There is this chasm that has to be leapt now in terms of XR. Maybe not in terms of augmented reality, but certainly in terms of virtual reality. In the respect that, as a commercial medium, um, I think my question to you is, do you think that this last year, I mean, I don't know any statistics that I can blurt out having to do with headset sales, but I do know that the the industry itself seems to me to have become more concentrated with a certain expertise. So what happened is this year might have a lot of companies may have crashed and burned and not been able to continue, and the ones that are left, we will see what happens. Um, but do you think this year has gone a long way to the commercial adoption, and by that I mean mass adoption of
Mhm.
virtual reality?
Here's what we know when it comes to, so there's two parts of this question. So there's the LBE, right? And LBE is just frozen,
Right. So
right?
location-based entertainment,
So,
because
yeah,
some of
yeah,
our audience may not know what that is.
yeah. So look, yeah. So the location-based stuff, obviously they can't do it, and there's some degree of apprehension about sharing devices. For the at-home market, Facebook says, right? And so we got to accept whether or not we believe their numbers. And as a journalist, I'm skeptical of any company's numbers. Facebook claims that they have sold more units of the Oculus 2, Quest 2, than of all the predecessors for that device combined,
Are they
which
actually giving us the
implies
number?
I didn't see the number. The claims came out last week, and I was like hip deep in event production, so I haven't looked at what the numbers are. But they're kind of relying upon some of the industry press to sort of do the sleuthing and do the math there, because they're definitely being elusive. We do know that the software sales have been going really well post Quest 2 for some of the companies inside that ecosystem. So, we had this situation where there was a lot of irrational enthusiasm. Um, ev- Everyone wanted the headsets to be the next iPhone, forgetting that there were Palm Pilots and Blackberries before there were iPhones. And then when they weren't, everyone got really, really excited about augmented reality, and all of the VC money went into Magic Leap. We know what happened there. So now we've come around to this point where we're 5 years right now into the VR renaissance. And we finally start to have something that looks like an install base. And we also see, when it comes to the development of the software and development of the experiences, that there is a continuum between VR and AR experiences, and that AR is pretty difficult to pull off in a way that's convincing and fun, other than just making little tiny things appear on your table, which aren't all that compelling and maybe not all that accurate until we started having the LiDAR sensors on our phones, right? Like, and that leap between a non-LiDAR enabled phone and a LiDAR enabled phone is massive. To the point where the rumors are that Apple is going to release a mixed reality device that maybe is VR first, of which I can only speculate that they're seeing the value of building out the worlds, building out the software ecosystem, and knowing that the road to tagging up physical space with the data layer runs through establishing the language of virtual object manipulation
That
that
is
happens.
that is such a great statement,
Yeah.
because the amount of data that exists, whether it's location-based data or data about that you would use in your home that's relating to a specific location, that already exists and gets better every day. That
Mm.
AI already exists and gets better every day, and that our virtual assistants and voice recognition exist and get better every day. So those things would be the things that people are already familiar with. Does that make for an easier sale of the next level, which is we're just taking you're used to an AI, you're used to this, now just put this on.
It still comes down to the experience you're having. It still comes down to whether or not it's right? You can't sell a piece of hardware if you don't have compelling software. You can to the early adopters who will be like, oh, I bought the new plastic. But everyone else is like, okay, but like, what can I do with it that I can't already do? Why is this better than watching Netflix?
Okay.
Why is this better than just, giving money to Disney for Disney Plus? Only now, after 5 years of development in the ecosystem of VR, and really probably only after another few years of development in the AR ecosystem. I mean, look at Niantic, creators of Pokemon Go, right? And Ingress before that, but also of Wizarding World, right? Ingress had a devoted fan base.
Millions.
Right?
I played Ingress.
Yeah.
And they had this global map where you could actually see where things were active. And it was, I mean, in terms of society, it was collaborative problem solving, regardless of whether you're working for the black side, the dark side or the light side.
Yeah. But still pretty niche in terms of, you walk down the street, most people have no idea. Remember what happened when Pokemon Go came out, right? Within like 2 weeks, there were zombie hordes of people roaming through parks and shuffling around on sidewalks, just cars lined up waiting as people sat not talking to each other, doing this on their phones, right? And then you look and they try to get the same thing going on with Wizarding World, and it didn't.
Well, the bigger brand is Pokemon, obviously. People already have that brand familiarity. I don't want to
they had the brand familiarity, but also
monopolize
the
conversation from Allison. But I just have one more point to make, and then I'll let it, because Allison has great questions, and my brain is going like this. So, utility. So, my perception is that enterprise through this year has expanded. And when I look at what Pico is doing, Pico headsets, HMDs, they're not marketing to consumers. They're marketing to enterprise. And there's experimentation going on in enterprise. Are those people that are experiencing things in enterprise, is that eventually going to bleed over to seed the commercial market because of training experiences and things like that?
I mean, I think it still comes down to whether or not the entertainment experiences are compelling, right? I mean, you talk about Pico, there's also, Microsoft leaned very heavily with HoloLens into enterprise. And like the entire pitch for Mesh is basically workplace collaboration in a seamless way, regardless of which device you're using, right? And that there are different affordances in the different devices to make it easier so that everyone can visualize together. So a lot of emphasis on collaboration. There's what's happening in the entertainment space, in the VR side, is that people are finding compelling ways to enjoy space together. So probably the best experience I had all last year, period, best experience, no qualifier, was attending BRC Black Rock City VR, Burning Man in alt space. I got to go on the virtual version of Burning Man with a group of about 7 or 8 friends and friends of friends. And we were zipping around, and all of the kind of experience you would have of roaming a festival with a pack of your friends and people getting lost and having to be gone back for, and like shouting like, where's Ivan? Where is he? He's over there. Okay, I'll go get him. It was all of those feelings, all of that dynamic, getting lost, reconnecting, seeing something that you didn't think could exist because it can't exist also, all of that over the course of a weekend. And it was magical, and it was made that way because it was a simple, easy to access, pretty straightforward social experience inside virtual reality. And people have learned that lesson, that the truth of this technology, what it affords and what it enables, is for us to connect together in higher bandwidth ways, to have more of ourselves come through, and be together, even if it's virtual. You can see this in things like The Underpresents, and when the actors talk about their experience of performing inside The Underpresents, which is a virtual reality game that also had this kind of living lounge space where both AI characters and live actors would be injected into to play with audience members. They talk about the relationships they forged between themselves and the consistent players. They talk about hugging someone in VR and how you can kind of feel it, particularly in this year when we're so starved for connection. So for those who had access this past year, I think we got to see the power of it. And that becomes kind of an evangelical class for the experiences. But the technology alone, the headsets alone, they can't get people to come in. You have to have the experiences. You have to have the stories. You have to have the playgrounds. You have to have the performers. Otherwise, you're just saying, well, here's a thing, go make it yourself, which some people are, but that's a whole nother kettle of fish.
So you know what I'm interested in? You mentioned at the very beginning about the essentially spatial audio that you, Brian pointed out that I'd like that, but you're under the covers in bed, right? So there's something very evocative about that, but there's also something quite simplistic about it too, right? In terms of you're there, even like with the container, like the shipping container, you're taken into the shipping container and the lights are out and you're just playing with sound. And I just wonder, when there's something there, it's almost like the comparison between watching a movie and reading the book. When you're reading the book, you play it out in your own head, you see the characters. I know from my experience of writing, to adapt book to film or whatever that might be, you're suddenly taking the characters from the audience's or the participants' own head and you're humanizing them with a casting agent or whatever it might be. How do you feel then about the keeping it simple idea, about the nature of like really fantastic evocative audio, like not just the storytelling elements, but all of the other audio that comes in around an experience when you are there with your eyes closed? Like if we can pull it off like that, then does it not mean perhaps we don't need so much of the plastic stuff, which is quite inaccessible for so many people? What's your thoughts there?
So, different platforms don't detract from each other, right? I always point out the fact that, radio didn't kill the music hall. Television didn't kill radio. It altered the dynamics of the market, right? If your goal is to have the one platform to rule them all and in the darkness bind them, if you're Wall Street and you absolutely have to own everything, then yeah, you're not going to be investing a lot of resources into a spatial audio form.
Right.
Unless you're really smart and you're Apple and you are investing resources into a spatial audio form, because these bad boys right here have affordances built into them to enable it, right? Yeah. To get positional tracking going on, because they understand what that opens up dimensionally.
Right.
Spatial audio, good spatial audio, is actually table stakes for me in VR. The fact that you can also, without the visuals, create a really compelling experience it's a bit of icing on the cake, but it's also a wonderful, avenue of its own. Those tend to be best as horror experiences, however. That's like a solitary genre, because they get you envisioning things. And there are things they do to create these effects in your mind, because you have winnowed out all the other sensory information. And so your mind starts filling in the gap. That principle, though, applies to any kind of immersive embodied experience, right? Our minds are going to fill out the loop. I always think about being at a virtual reality expo about a year and a half into the Renaissance, and someone was demonstrating, a 6-axis controller thing that they had modified with just these plates that just kind of could rub this way in your hand. And they had just a flat screen, and they said, hold this and pretend you're blocking arrows, and the arrows are going to come at you on the screen. Not VR, just a flat screen like I'm looking at right now. And I'm holding this thing, and as the arrows kind of like, reached the point on the screen where it would have been like 1-to-1, like it just went, all the plate did was just rub up and down on my hand. And yet I felt a thunk. I felt weight. My mind filled in, even though I wasn't getting direction this way. I was getting this way. And yet the brain was like, oh, thunk.
It takes me to WeirdCon.
Yeah. Like doesn't take much to get people to fill in the gaps and suspend their disbelief. You've just got to have the right injunction. You got to have the right ask for them to invest in. You can't assume they're going to. You've got to invite them in.
But that's a skill of storyteller, isn't it, as well? Like to know where the gaps are.
Speaking of gaps,
here we go.
We're actually at the end of our first segment. So I'm going to disembody us for a week, and we'll all be wearing the same clothing. But we'll be back with Noah again for the next segment. This is so deep, I feel like we have to do like 3 segments. But we'll start out with the second segment. So we'll be back next week. Thank you, Noah, for joining us this week.
I have so many more questions.
Thank you, Allison. Yep. We definitely are going to have more questions. As a matter of fact, Allison, I'm thinking in terms of Clubhouse, we should just do one whole session with Noah. Okay, we'll see you next week on the Story Hour. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel.